Hello, everyone, and welcome to this virtual symposium where we're talking about apprenticeships and their impact on skills and workforce development, as well as their ability to improve equity and diversity across employment for our sector. For those of you who didn't know, the word symposium is Greek and it means a drinking party or convivial conversation. I can't promise you a drinking party, but I'd like very much to try to offer you a convivial conversation with my fellow panelists. In a moment, you'll hear from 4 very different organizations, all of which share a common focus. They're prioritizing apprenticeships as part of their overall organizational strategies. Today's event is hosted by Creative and Cultural Skills, for the culture sector skills body for the cultural industries, with a focus on connecting, guiding, and representing colleagues from education, as well as creative and cultural organizations to create a fair and skilled sector. My name is Vilma Nikolaidou. I'm a trustee of Creative and Cultural Skills, and I'm also the Associate Director for People Strategy and Culture for the University of the Arts London. I'm a woman of Mediterranean origin with long brown hair. We're delighted to have so many people joining us today. And before we get started, I just want to kick off with a few housekeeping things. You'll see that we're providing captions today. So if you'd like to switch those on, please access them below in settings, and we will be including sign language interpretation as part of the recording as well. In a minute, our guests will describe as well as introduce themselves in the mode that I did earlier on. If you have any accessibility issues or any come up during the event, please email communications@ccskills.org.uk. It's fairly straightforward, communications@ccskills.org.uk. After we heard the presentations from everyone, we'll be taking questions, so please feel free to pop these in the Q&A box, and I'll do my best to manage as many of those as I can. Now, on to our guests for them to introduce and describe themselves. And I will start with Baz.
Hi, my name is Rashid. I'm from the Manchester Museum. My description is a man of South Asian heritage, mid-length hair with a beard. I'm in a room surrounded by plants with frames full of plants.
Thank you, Baz. Pritti.
Hello, my name is Pritti Shoker. I'm from the Royal Shakespeare Company. I'm a brown woman with Indian roots and have black hair with some white streaks. Thank you.
Thanks, Pritti. Grazyna.
Hi, I'm Geraghty Richmond. I'm the head of engagement at Westminster Abbey. I'm a white woman with bobbed brown hair tucked behind my ears. I'm wearing my glasses on my head. I'm wearing a green jumper. And my virtual background today is the nave of Westminster Abbey. So I've got pillars either side of me, a gold screen, and stained glass windows and chandeliers immediately behind me.
Thank you. Kath.
Hi, I'm Kath Geraghty from the National Theatre. I'm a white woman in my 50s. I've got short bobbed black hair with streaks of grey in it, and I'm wearing my glasses today. And I'm in a room at the Barbican Theatre today, and I have a blurry white background behind me.
Excellent. Thank you all very much. Now we're going to hear a short presentation about how each of the organizations represented here today are embedding apprentices in their workforce. And we're going to do this in the following running order. We're going to go to Manchester Museum first, the Royal Shakespeare Company afterwards, followed by Westminster Abbey, and then the National Theatre. So, Manchester Museum, over to you.
So, with regards to at the Manchester Museum, we actually offered 3 strands with regards to skills and training. We offer apprentices, which are 12 to 18 months, and they're aged at young people 16 and over. They're level 2 and 3 qualifications, and they're paid. We do internships, which are short-term or long-term placements, and again, they're aimed at people that are age 16 or over, and it's more to do with upskilling, and these are also paid and unpaid. And then the other strand that we actually have is work experiences that's offered to schools, colleges, and young people that are 18 and over. Mm-hmm. Now, with regards to our apprentice, what we actually did was the Manchester Museum, in partnership with the British Council, offered apprentices. we managed to get a training provider, which was Access College, and what we provided for our apprentices was 2 mentors, one curatorial mentor and another mentor, which was an outreach mentor, and both of them actually came together to actually mentor our apprentices. The apprentices themselves, we actually offered 2 apprentices an 18-month contract at a salary of around about £23,000 each, and they were at the Manchester living wage. We were first asked by our partners to offer the apprentices at the apprentice wage, which was at £4.21 an hour. But we as a museum, we actually thought that was actually a very low wage, and we actually offered the apprentices at the Manchester living wage, which was £9.80 an hour. After that, what we actually did was we advertised the post for about 4 weeks. We recruited a panel which actually consisted of young people on the actual panel, and we recruited our apprentices in 2021. As part of the apprentices curriculum, we actually made a bespoke curriculum for the apprentices. So there were some bespoke modules that were specifically for museums. We provided employer practice with regards to the apprentices themselves. That actually ran several projects, and one was actually an international project between Karachi. There was another international project with India where it culminated in a music festival as well. With regards to the apprentices themselves, they actually produced a portfolio, and this portfolio was actually all online, so they didn't actually have to deal with any paperwork. All the training was also delivered online with regards to the apprentices. And then moving forwards, we were one of the first museums within the Northwest to actually offer apprentices, and we were one of the first cultural venues to offer 2 apprentices at the Manchester living wage, and we're hoping to offer more apprentices at the Manchester living wage at a level 3 and above qualifications. So in a nutshell, that's what we offered.
The thing that one should not do, I was muted, I'm really sorry. Baz, thank you so much. That was a really good overview of what you've done despite the adversity with technology. Let's go to Pritti next and the Royal Shakespeare Company. Pritti, over to you. I can see that we're looking at some slides. I think they've got the right logo. Pritti, you're on.
Fantastic, thank you. A warm welcome to you all. So my name is Pritti Shoker. I'm the Apprenticeship and Training Manager at the Royal Shakespeare Company, who feels lucky enough to look after training and development opportunities to upskill, reskill staff, but also project manage the very important project Teaching Theatre, for which the main aims are in opening up training and development opportunities to populations that are underrepresented in our workforce, but also the arts sector, and also an opportunity to provide and collaborate with participants to fully be able to learn and develop in the environment that is most suitable. I present with great gratitude, being a woman from a Sikh Indian background with lived experience of the impact stereotypes or stigmas or barriers can have to pursuing early career learning opportunities in the arts sector. So it's fantastic to be here. People start from different places, so true inclusion and belonging requires equitable action. Everyone, everywhere can play a part. So I'm going to share a little bit about the partnership work that we've been doing at the Royal Shakespeare Company. So partnerships with schools over the long term is what has made the biggest difference for us in terms of having an effective pipeline into apprenticeships for young people from backgrounds currently underrepresented in the creative industries. Last year, the Department for Education quite rightly said that talent and potential are everywhere, but opportunity isn't, I would add. That fact drives the Royal Shakespeare Company's commitment to working in partnership with 250 schools across 26 cities and from towns from Cornwall to Middlesbrough. Through those long-term partnerships, we have developed a pre-apprenticeship program called the Next Generation Program, which provides fully funded opportunities for young people from low-income backgrounds to undertake work experience in a whole range of different departments and disciplines, both at the RSC, the Royal Shakespeare Company, and in their local regional theatres. So the program formally starts at the age of 13, and 100 young people each year participate in those pre-apprenticeship program opportunities. Those young people are now reaching the age of 17 and 18 and will also be supporting in their applications and interviews for apprenticeship roles, both at the RSC, but also other organisations within our sector. Growing partnerships and relationships with schools is one of the keys to recruiting young people from groups currently underrepresented in the industry. The diversity we look for in our industry is already in our classrooms. Those kind of relationships takes time and investment, but as well as those kind of relationships, there is a need to promote creative careers more widely. We currently have 12 apprentices, with additional 5 starting in April, and we envisage 28 by 28 in total by spring 2024. We are proud to be sharing the journey of our apprentice, Kate Bradley, who is part of our automation department, a team previously where the roles were occupied by men.
In simple terms, I fly scenery and people using winches and computer programming. It's really fun, really fun. Right from the first day, I was thrown in and doing the proper job. Just about to start my college course as well, learning and getting paid to do a really cool job. Didn't think I'd get this apprenticeship because I didn't have the experience necessarily that I thought I needed. But I just said I need someone to teach me from the ground up, and they said they were willing to give me the opportunity to learn. Be open to trying everything. So my apprenticeship's in automation, but I'm also learning a little bit of LX, a little bit of sound, a little bit of video, a little bit of stage. Just be open to every opportunity.
We have a culture where all apprentices are valued, and opening up barriers to engage in apprenticeship opportunity is our highest priority. So similar to what Manchester Museum said, we offer our apprentices a real living wage, so £10.90 an hour, and also opportunities where we have a bursary allocated for travel and accommodation. Inspired by the concept of teaching hospitals, Centre of Excellence for Healthcare that also provide medical training for future and current health professionals, we believe there are strong parallels with the way we work now and how we can plan for the future. So developing, evolving, embedding that concept of the RSC as a teaching theatre into our working culture with apprenticeships as a route has been priority and continues to be. We regularly review the development of our apprenticeship program via our Teaching Theatre Leadership Working Group, which covers key concepts to make apprentice experience the best it possibly can, with representation from our apprentices, colleagues from our Creative and Cultural Skills, Anthony Skates, and also collaborative meetings and steering group meetings with our training providers, and also offering those networking opportunities, not just internally, but also externally. Ensuring that early career opportunities enable progression routes from people from all backgrounds that are underrepresented in the arts and sector. We take positive action, similar to what we've said in terms of the Next Generation Programme, but also being part of the working social mobility working group for Apprenticeships and Diversity Champion Network. Ensuring we are opening doors, barriers, not just for young people, but also individuals who are experiencing challenges towards pathways. I will be now sharing a journey of an apprentice, Lisa Gaunt, a 50-something-year-old who was a carer.
My husband and I had a theatre company, the first sort of regional comedy club outside of London. It was really exciting. Then I had a family, and Much as you think that you can go back to work after your children are little, I didn't, and then later I couldn't. So here I am, age 50-something, really needing some good, solid experience in a job, learning about the bigger organisation, the wider organisation. So yeah, here I am. The apprenticeship is giving us a really broad skill set, so we'll see how it goes. It's really exciting. I'm really enjoying myself. Yes, it's great. Learning lots, meeting lots of new people.
Thank you. Thank you. So on this slide, we've shared some of our reflections on some of the work that we're doing and what we can do as an arts sector to work together on perhaps reflection, but also some of our barriers. But just to add, in terms of our apprenticeships and how our apprenticeships are providing individuals from underrepresented backgrounds with the practical work-based route into the creative industry. The very simple fact is that apprentice roles need to be actual jobs that exist in the organisation, as opposed to additional roles that last for the time of the apprenticeship. Where apprenticeship roles are part of an organisation staffing quota, that means there is an inbuilt progression route to full-time employment. That makes learning and earning more attractive proposition for different age groups, and it's important that we make clear apprenticeships are available for all age groups. At the RSC, as we saw, we've got an example of a 50-plus-year-old who shares the aspiration to work within our industry, but also has that dedication to that development. Moving on to our obstacles. For people from underrepresented groups pursuing these opportunities, a key one is salary versus cost of living. So for example, if you are from a low income background, it is hard to see how you can afford to make a choice to be an apprentice when your wage may be 50% below living wage. So we recognize that additional training is the rationale of the minimum apprentice salary, but without other kinds of support in place, for example, travel bursaries. An apprentice being paid a minimum salary who also has a paid travel and accommodation cost simply cannot live. Is there any current research we can draw on together to understand the extent to the salary is a barrier of people entering apprenticeships? We currently have 12 apprentices at the RSC. They are paid real living wage as opposed to apprenticeship minimum wage. And they are still citing concerns about how they will manage. So that's where we've put opportunities in terms of the bursary for travel and accommodation, but also our working group, our teaching theatre leadership working group, is regularly reviewing these challenges and offering support. Next slide, please. Thank you. If you have any questions, please do not hesitate to contact us. That's it from me. Thank you.
Pritti, thank you so much. There are already a lot of commonalities in your story and in Buzz's story earlier on, so I hope the audience is already thinking of questions to put to you later on. We will move to Grazyna now, and then there will be an opportunity for us all to have a conversation and for others to ask questions. So Grazyna, over to you.
So my story is very, very different so far. I should start by saying that we're a month into having our first apprentice in my team. So yeah, a slightly different angle. And I want to tell you sort of the story of how we got to where we are today. So we have had apprentices in the Abbey before, but we're going through a huge period of change at the moment. So that's really what I wanted to talk about. And the aim is that having an apprentice as part of our staffing team will become the norm in the future. But I wanted to set some context for you. So Westminster Abbey, where I work, is a 1,000-year-old Christian place of worship, which is a working church and a tourist destination. Much of our working practice is set in statutes which date back hundreds of years, and many of the people who work here have job titles which were established with the founding of the building. So that's the context within which I and other colleagues are trying to make change. There are obviously new departments which wouldn't have been part of that original foundation, IT as an obvious one, HR, visitor experience, learning engagement teams, to name a few. But one of the problems I think we have in the Abbey is that each department works separately. Everyone has a specific job to do, and that is the one that, you know, they come to work and do. And the pandemic exacerbated this enormously. So about 6 or 7 years ago, when IT took on an apprentice, no one knew anything about it. But the lessons which they learned on that journey weren't shared. The apprenticeships weren't championed across the organisation, and they should have been, because actually that apprentice went on to have a full-time job in the organisation. So it was obviously really successful, and he's a brilliant part of our team now. So definitely something which should be celebrated. In 2018, the Abbey launched a social engagement policy. And about 6 months later, I was seconded to write a plan for how to engage with one strand of that, which was titled Disadvantaged Young People. I spoke to a lot of sector colleagues. I assessed the provision already available in the area for young people and what we were in a unique position to offer. And then I made proposals which included hiring apprentices to offer career development opportunities to those who might not traditionally consider a role in the heritage sector, or applying to Westminster Abbey itself, which I know is perceived as a posh, privileged institution tied up with monarchy and parliament, not to mention that it's a Christian church. I promise when you get to know us, we're not all that bad. But nothing really happened after my secondment, as there wasn't an Abbey lead for social engagement. There was no one to write an action plan or advocate for that sort of organisational change. Our leadership changed, and then the pandemic hit. So that put a stop to a lot of programming. But then in June last year, as a result of sort of post-pandemic change happening internally, I was appointed to this new role. So I've been working at the Abbey for about 11 years. I was a joint head of learning before this, and now my role is sort of separated from the learning department, and we have a new department now with engagement. We made sure that social engagement and writing the action plan and the strategy for that was part of my role. So that's what I'm doing now. With colleagues across the organisation, I've written a statement which clearly sets out our priorities in this sphere and other sort of key priority areas. So one of them is the environment, addressing climate crisis. One is celebrating communities, so thinking about our narrative. And the other one is developing people, ensuring current and future staff can be fulfilled and developed within their roles. And this last one is where apprenticeships come in. So I have provision in my team to have an apprentice. She started last month, and she's doing a cultural learning and participation officer apprenticeship, which is a level 3 qualification. We also made the decision to pay her a London living wage. And we're working with Westminster Adult Education Services as the learning provider. So it was important to us to work with a local learning provider and make new links in the area as well. So far, it's going well, I think. We have our first sort of month-end catch-up between me, the apprentice, and the learning provider this afternoon. So I'll keep you posted. But having an apprentice in the team who can get involved with all of our activity is fantastic. Planning a work programme for her, which encourages development and reflective practice, is a wonderful way of working. I know it's the aim for all of us, but sometimes we do get caught up in the day-to-day, and it's difficult to remember those important parts of our job. But when it's built into the programme and their completion of a course depends on it, it really does focus you. And it's something that I hope to build more actively into my whole team's development. I would say, though, of all of the 8 applicants that we had for the apprenticeship, they all had postgraduate qualifications, and some of them had experience working in heritage already. And next year, when I advertise for an apprentice to fill that role, I want to ensure I get a real diversity of applicants. If anyone has advice on how to do this, I'm all ears. I've already learned a couple of things from Baz and Pritti this morning. But having said that, we did have 3 internal candidates, and that still works towards that developing people objective that we have. It's an incredible opportunity for her to bolster what knowledge and experience she already has informally, with a formal qualification and real hands-on practical application. So we also, you know, in that developing people objective, have other opportunities for casual secondments, so 1 day a week in another team for the VE team, for example, work experience from local schools, placement students from universities, and training opportunities for all staff and volunteers. But my next steps with the apprenticeships at the Abbey is really to work with the adult education services to promote the variety of apprenticeships available and advocate for having an apprentice in the team from a managerial perspective. I'll do this with other heads of department ahead of our budget year, which starts in October, alongside rolling out the new social engagement plan, which has accountability built into it at all levels of the organisation. We'll see what happens. But my feeling so far is that people really are keen for this sort of change. And if we work together, then we can make it happen across the organisation. Thank you.
Grazyna, thank you so much. As you said, different part of the journey for you, but so important to hear all these links, and especially the story with, we had one and then nobody knew about it, and all of that. That's a story that I have heard in other organizations. We'll move on to Kath. Before that, I need to say to the audience that the slides that we weren't able to share for Buzz's presentation will be circulated. So rest assured that you will see that rich content that Buzz covered. So, Kath and the National Theatre, over to you.
Thank you very much for having me. It's lovely to be here, and amazing to hear the stories that have gone beforehand and to see what's similar and what's different and how we can help each other and support each other, which is the crux of all of this. So I joined the National Theatre 11 years ago now to set up and manage their apprenticeship programme. We took on our first 2 apprentices in 2012, February 2012, one of whom was a raging success and the other one was not, which was actually, we made sure the person who was not a raging success was all right. But it was a really important learning for us. We learnt more from the issues that he had than we did from our really successful apprentice. And so I'd be forever grateful to that young man, and I hope he's all right wherever he is. So we started with technical theatre, 2 apprentices in technical theatre, and in the 11 years since then, we've grown that programme. We've now had close on 50 people start with us on apprenticeships, on these junior apprenticeships. We also use apprenticeships to upskill our staff, but that's maybe a different conversation. But so we've had close to 50 apprentices start on entry-level posts across 16 different departments in the National Theatre. So that ranges from technical theatre, where we started. We've done carpentry, scenic metalwork, scenic art, prop making, costume, wigs, hair and makeup, so covering those craft areas, which are so important. But we've also done some office-based apprenticeships as well. So we've had marketing, we've had events apprenticeships in both our fundraising teams and our learning teams. We've had IT apprentices, which have been really successful actually, and I currently have a business administration apprentice in my own team. I think the point about shouting about them is really valid, and I think there's one of the questions asked is what impact has apprentices had on your business? And I think one thing that's been really obvious is the way that it's changed people's attitudes to inexperience. Everyone that we recruit, when we recruit, we're not looking for any pre-existing skills or knowledge at all. Quite often the apprentices that we take on have never been in a theatre before they come for their interview day. We're interested in attitude and aptitude, and that's what we try and test in our recruitment. So we really are bringing in people with very little experience and knowledge, and obviously that means there's a big support job to be done there to make sure that they aren't overwhelmed when they start with us. But what the building has learned is that if you give people an opportunity and you help them to succeed, then they produce amazing results. So I think when I first started, the organisation, which was a very different organisation, was very concerned about bringing in these young people or inexperienced people. And now I think pretty much everyone at the National Theatre is a big fan of our apprentices. And I'm known as, oh, that Kath who does apprentices around the organisation. And it's brilliant. It's just lovely. Partly that, of course, is due to the amazing individuals that we've had that have come through our doors. As I say, we've had close to 50. We've had 86% completion rate. We've had a few that haven't completed for various reasons, but 86% have. And of those, 90% have gone on their first job after their apprenticeship has been paid professional work in the area we taught them. We've had some great stories, obviously, because we've got some depth, some longevity here. So we have the classic, our first apprentice, the one who was a great success. She completed her apprenticeship with us. We taught her about freelancing and how to survive in the real world and networking. She went off and she worked for various organisations, including the Young Vic and the Bridge and a couple of other theatres, and then came back to us at a senior level and is now in a senior position in the stages crew at the Olivier, in the Olivier Theatre. So that was what we wanted. That was the plan, that would happen. But then we've others who have done other things. We've one who went and joined the Merchant Navy, one who went and joined TfL, one who set up his own business and started employing apprentices himself. So I think the transferable skills element is really important. It's very young at 18 to decide that you really, really want to do this. And some people do, but other people, it is about skilling them up and giving them confidence and them enabling them to look at life as a series of good opportunities that they can go and reach. So I count as successful anyone who finds their journey, even if they leave behind the thing that they actually did with us. I think a couple of themes that have already come up. We also pay London Living Wage now. We used to pay national minimum wage for an adult, regardless of the age of the apprentice, but we now pay London Living Wage for fairly obvious reasons. I think that is a really important point. And this point about support for the apprentices, but also support for the people who are day-to-day engaging with the apprentices. So I sit in the HR department or people department, we are now. But so the managers who are interacting with the apprentices on a day-to-day basis, they also need support, because sometimes they get a bit worried or anxious, and we're there to reassure them and help them work through any issues that might come through. Just before I stop, and obviously happy to answer any questions, and maybe we can have a conversation about some recruitment, how to ring fence Grazyna. But I just wanted to flag something that we're now working on. One of the obstacles, I think, in our sector to people taking on apprentices is the longevity of them. And I know that some SMEs and sole traders can't guarantee a 12-month or 24-month job role for somebody. So the National Theatre are working in partnership with Ambassador Theatre Group, White Light and the Royal Opera House on a pilot programme of a portable apprenticeship system, which DFE are running, Department for Education are running. And that would, hopefully, if we can make this work, it would enable people to, on short-term contracts, to do an element of their apprenticeship training and bank that learning, and then move to a different contract and build up in a kind of adult education way. It's always seemed remarkably unfair that you can get 99% of your way through your apprenticeship, and if you don't manage to get through the endpoint assessment for whatever reason, you can't take that learning with you to end up in a qualification. So the portable apprenticeship pilot scheme hopefully will go some way to enabling a slightly different way of this sector to deliver apprenticeships. And also just so you know, if anyone's in the room, I'm chair of the Institute for Apprenticeships and Technical Education Creative and Design Route panel. So if anyone has any questions around that as well, feel free to ask. Thank you.
Amazing. Kath, as I did preface, in a very different part of the journey, much more mature in the provision of apprenticeships. Thank you all so much. I think that set the scene really beautifully for a conversation between us. We've got some questions coming from the audience, which we'll try to incorporate. I was going to ask you all, how did you all get started, but you touched up on this. So I think I'm going to move straight into training providers, because I know that's a big issue for everybody who does apprenticeship. So how did you navigate working with training providers, and which qualifications to go for? And I'm going to start, go back to Baz. Baz, what about you?
Yes, so we were quite lucky, because we've got a range of training providers that's actually offered by our university, which is the Manchester University. So we had a range of training providers, and then we went with the training provider that actually offered the qualification that was most suited to museum and heritage backgrounds, and that was the cultural and learning participation officer role. But even within that, there were certain modules that actually didn't align with the cultural and heritage background, museum background. So we actually worked with the training provider to provide some bespoke modules, and that worked really, really well, that were quite bespoke to museums and the heritage sector.
Thank you. So some customization, some already there. Pritti, over to you. And in your answer, can you also cover which standards you offer? There's been a question about the Royal Shakespeare Company.
Yes, sure. Thank you, Vilma. So we went through a tendering process where we put tendering documentation together, which I'm happy to share templates of if it's helpful. And we went out to tender and shared the planning documents of what we had in terms of the apprenticeship program. So standards that we were looking to cover, but also standards that we had in interest in developing as well. So we were involved in the Scenic Automation Trailblazer group and sharing from the onset that we were perhaps going to transfer some of our creative venue technician standards to another one. We went out for tender for 6 weeks. We then went on to shortlisting, where we shortlisted 4 providers, and then we decided to go through an interview process, and we went with a consortium of training providers. So we went with Chichester College, and we went with Solihull College and University Centre, Birmingham. And we work collaboratively, as I mentioned in our presentation, we collaboratively work together to ensure, so for example, an apprentice at Chichester College is not receiving a different pastoral or wellbeing package to perhaps a apprentice at Solihull College and University Centre, Birmingham. So we're very much working together to build on some of the practices that we're developing, but also the process that we follow for some key concepts. Karen Hedger, thank you so much for your questions. You asked which standards do we offer. We also offer Creative and Cultural Participation Officer, Creative Venue Technician, Customer Service Level 3, Garment Maker Level 3 is coming up as well. And we've got more coming up in Creative Venue Technician with focus of light. So similar to what Baz had mentioned, we are using electives to make it a sound specific, light specific, and a stage prop specific opportunity. We're also very much interested in making sure that we've got opportunities perhaps to share some of our unique areas. So for example, we've got a learning and national partnership team, and we've got some associate learning practitioners that deliver modules to support some part of our apprenticeship program, and we're working with our training providers to build a portfolio of us delivering some of those modules.
Really close partnership with training providers. Thank you, Pritti. Grazyna, what about you?
Yeah, so I already mentioned that we work with Westminster Adult Education Services, and part of the reason for that, although we wanted a local provider, was that they did offer this Cultural Learning and Participation Officer apprenticeship. Because I am the one delivering, with the apprentice in the Abbey at the moment, I sort of had a free rein to choose what kind of apprenticeship we wanted, and we felt that that particular apprenticeship was a good fit for my team. And then the learning from that could then be sort of shared with the rest of the organisation. But they offer a broad range of apprenticeships at Ways, so that training provider could still work for other apprenticeships in the Abbey as well.
Thank you. Kath, over to you.
Yeah, I mean, we offer such a wide range of apprenticeships. Obviously, we work with a number of learning providers because there is no one learning provider that could deliver all the standards that we have used over the years. And often there isn't a huge amount of choice. So we've currently a props making apprentice who's actually on an upholstery standard because we're interested in her doing soft cloth-based props. So she's on an upholstery standard. There's only 2 organisations that are delivering that. And so it was just having a conversation with the 2 of them, and one of them really matched our values and clearly gave the apprentices a really good supported infrastructure, which was important because she's block release, so she goes up to Leicester and stays in Leicester from Monday to Friday to do her block release up there with that training provider. So often there isn't that much choice, but it is really about having a conversation. I'm very impressed with Pritti and your tendering. That sounds like a really thorough process. I have to say we've not managed to do it quite that way, but it is about having a conversation with the learning provider. I think you really get a sense whether they understand what it is you're looking for, or whether they're just there trying to generate numbers. And so yeah, you just have to get out there and have conversations, really.
Thank you. probably unfairly, I'll come to you because you have been on this journey much longer, Kath. There's a lot of questions and interest around funding and how the panelists and their organizations are funding these apprenticeships. And although funding is an issue for anyone and everyone in the sector, there are really some smaller organizations who don't have the infrastructure that you perhaps have. So how have you funded? What points or support or help might be there, or tips for people from smaller organizations?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a really important question, obviously. I don't want to go too far back on this journey, but so there are two ways in which apprenticeship training is funded, depending on the size of the organisation. So we're a large organisation, which means we pay into the apprenticeship levy. And so the training element for us is paid for by the government through our levy. Now, for a smaller organisation, I'm not quite so au fait with the detail of it. You can access levy money, but you don't get the whole. There may be somebody in the room actually who's stronger, and Karen may be stronger on this than me. You can access levy money as a smaller organisation, but although you don't necessarily get 100% of it, it's also possible for a larger organisation like mine to offset some of our unspent levy money and to fund apprentices in other organisations. So we did that with the new Victoria Theatre in Stoke. They took on a technical venue apprentice, and we used some of our excess levy spend to fund that. So if the relationships with larger organisations and unlocking their levy, because no one's spending their whole levy really in our sector. So good, have conversations with the large organisations that you know. But it only pays the training. It doesn't pay for anything else. So the salary costs do sit with the organisation, which is why some organisations do have to pay the lower wage. We absolutely understand that. But that's a hard call, because obviously then you're excluding a whole bunch of people from being able to apply and take up the post, but that's a decision that might have to go that way. I would say we fundraise against apprenticeships, so our fundraising team our apprentices are forever being wheeled out to meet donors or potential funders or whoever happens to be passing to talk about their experiences, because they are the best advocates of what an apprenticeship is like, is to meet the actual apprentices. So we generate income through our apprentices. It's something that donors are interested in funding for really obvious reasons. I don't need to go into those reasons, but it's a tough one. There is no simple and easy answer. And I do have to say that at the National, I'm very fortunate in that if we didn't generate enough money to pay the salaries, we are committed to still delivering those apprenticeships. So they come on our payroll. And if it gets covered by the fundraising, that's great. And I know that that's a really fortunate position for me to be in. There are other organisations who rely solely on external funding, sponsorship or donations that fund the salaries of their apprentices.
Kath, thank you so much. I don't know if the other colleagues would like to come in on this. With any insights, Baz?
Yes, with regards to external funding, our apprentices were actually funded by the British Council and National Heritage Lottery Fund. We have found that the National Heritage Lottery Fund are very, very keen on funding apprentices. So absolutely in a funding bid, if you were to put in, you want X number of apprentices and show your finances, they are very, very keen, and British Council were a very large supportive partner. With regard to the apprentice levy, as Kath was mentioning, I mean, we were quite lucky because we're part of the University of Manchester. They paid for our apprentice levy, but as a university as well, we're very, very keen to actually partner up with very small organisations. So we're very keen to actually fund the apprentice levy part, because we can offset it from our apprentice levy, because we have a very, very large pot that's not actually used.
That's very useful. Thanks, Baz. Two of our panelists have now mentioned this idea of partnering with bigger organizations. I hope that's helpful to those of you watching from smaller organizations. I want to take us all to recruitment now and recruiting for these apprenticeships, but particularly with a focus on how you have tried or achieved the aim of diversifying the organization. There's a specific question also around how you've attracted or recruited global majority candidates in your effort. So let's turn our attention to recruitment with that focus, and I'll go to Grazyna first for that.
I was going to say, can I sit this one out and just take notes? Because
but actually,
so I can tell you what we did, but yeah, I think there were a couple of things that impacted our recruitment, not least, you know, our HR team was like massively stretched when we were putting out the adverts and things like that. So it went out a bit later than we had planned. We had planned to have a month-long sort of application period. That ended up being 2 weeks. It also ended up being over Christmas, which I know is not a great time to be recruiting. And what we did was we put it on our website and we put it through our social media channels and things like that. But then we also advertised through Westminster Adult Education Services. But I think, yeah, it probably didn't get as broad a reach as it could have done because of the timing of when we were putting out that application. I had made sure to strip out all of the expectations around qualifications and experience and things like that. But you know, the pool of the other applicants that we ended up with, just, you know, they had those things, but were beginning career, you know, early career people who had sort of entry-level positions in other organisations or had volunteered or were doing an adjacent job but wanted to move into heritage engagement. So, you know, this would have been the apprenticeship would have been sort of an experience step up for them, but they were already sort of involved in the sector. But yeah, I'm going to stop talking now and take notes about what everyone else says.
Thank you. I'll go to Pritti.
Thank you. So I can share a couple of processes of what we did in terms of the recruitment process. So we took positive action from some of our relationships that we have, particularly our associate schools, but also some of our stakeholders. So what we did is we offered an information session of the upcoming apprenticeship programs that are coming up, and that was via Teams as an opportunity for those that are interested to speak to someone from the department, and I joined and shared a bit of an overview of the apprenticeship program and what that can look like practically. And then there was also an apprentice on the pilot panel to answer any questions as well. In terms of recruitment process, we took different approaches to this, and we worked with heads of departments to decide on what process we wanted to take in terms of the recruitment. So for some, we grouped up some of our apprentice standards together, and some of our heads of departments worked together, where we did an assessment afternoon. So it was an assessment day where we invited all apprentices, potential apprentices, to the RSC, where we gave them a tour, and followed by three activities around team building, communication, that kind of thing. And then there was an informal interview after that. And the informal interview asked structured questions, which we sent to all candidates beforehand. And the reason we decided to do it in this format, or we agreed to do it in this format, is because we wanted it to be a networking opportunity from the very start. We had 5 operations apprenticeships coming up, for which we followed the customer service level 3 standard, and we wanted to develop those relationships from the very start, but also give an opportunity of various types of assessment, but also in an environment where it can support perhaps some of the typical challenges that you may have in an interview. The other aspect, in terms of other more technical areas, we also did a tour, followed by a informal interview where we sent questions, and then a couple of departments decided to do a Teams interview with a presentation, which we sent questions before, followed by a second session where there was an open opportunity for a tour and to meet some team members for question and answers.
Pritti, thank you. Some really very, very solid examples there of how far an employer goes to open up the pool and the process, and make everything much more welcoming, accessible, and meaningful. Equally solid offer there from Grazyna around how a role is presented and how it's described, and what we look for in these roles. So really good examples there. And Kath, last but not least, over to you. Recruitment of apprenticeships, but with a particular focus on diversifying our workforces.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's two sides to it, isn't there? There's getting the message out, and then there is the recruitment process itself. And Pritti has talked a lot about that, and we do very similar things, and I'm happy to share any of those that people are interested in. The getting the message out, I think, is difficult. We try to, our network is, people who come and see shows at the National Theatre. The people visiting our website on a regular basis are our core audience, and they're not the people that we're hoping to get our apprenticeship opportunities out to. So although I do put them on our website and I do put them on the National Apprenticeship Services website, I don't advertise them anywhere else. What I do is I use our networks of charity partners who have their networks, who are the people that we're hoping to get these opportunities out to. So rather than reinvent the wheel, we circulate our opportunities out to people who are already working in those communities, and we try to build strong partnerships so that those charity organisations understand that we are serious about our commitment to giving people jobs and in supporting people through their apprenticeship and through their employment. And it takes time. It takes time to build those relationships, especially when you're a big concrete building on the South Bank. So that, I think that's our kind of main strategy, is to get other people to do it for us, because they're talking to those people and the barriers are less at that end. And then we're very happy for those partners to support their clients through the recruitment process. So we quite regularly will have job coaches come into the interviews, or mums and dads, actually, if anyone wants to bring anybody, we're very happy for them to come in. One thing I would just like to share around the recruitment side of things, the one on our application form. So we're always trying to make the barriers less and less, and if anyone has great ideas, I'm always open to hear them. But one thing that has worked really well is on the application form, we don't ask any questions about education history or work history. We ask questions about, tell us about a time when you, which looking at things like teamwork, as Pritti's mentioned, those kind of areas. But what we do have is a box on the application form for them to put in what someone else thinks about them. So it's not really a reference, because we're not looking for how they performed in a workplace, but we just say it's almost a character reference or a supportive statement from somebody who could be a careers advisor or a teacher or a member of their church, or anyone they know. We've had best friends kind of filling in that section, and that can give a really nice insight if the person isn't particularly articulate themselves. Someone else can articulate on their behalf. But what's really important, and this is the bit my managers struggle with, if someone doesn't fill in that bit, it doesn't go against them. So what we're trying to strip out as well is the things that on a normal recruitment when you do your first sift, and you're looking for the bad grammar, or they didn't use capitals, or they didn't answer all the questions, and they would normally be the first ones out the door on your first sift. Those are the ones we're pulling back in to see if there's stuff in there that actually is interesting around that. So it is a different mindset recruiting. To increase diversity, you have to have a different mindset and look at your criteria. You set your criteria differently in the first place, and then look at what comes back in a different way. And then there's a whole load on dropping the barriers through the rest of the recruitment process. But I think Pritti's covered some of that.
Just adding on to what Kath has just mentioned as well about a different mindset, we've opened opportunities where for apprenticeships, any roles, there is an opportunity to upload a video instead of a written response.
That's really important, and I hear a lot of practices like this. One of my favorites of mine in my earliest days in the museum world was in collection care, rather than asking for experience of kind of having dealt with a collection, because who would have done this, without experience. We ask people to describe how they care for something they own and love, and that was one of the nicest moments, of kind of enlightening moments in my recruitment career. We have a question here around salaries and the barrier, the bar, even with the London Living Wage or the Manchester Living Wage, it's still still a barrier, and it's been identified by many of you. How would the sector or the sectors that we're working in might be able to tackle that? Any ideas from the panel?
In terms of salaries, there is a big discrepancy at the moment with regards to apprentices, because the apprentices, the government, in one sense, as a qualification, it's classed as training, but unfortunately, the government classes it as employment. So quite a lot of the young people that we actually employ that come from low-income backgrounds that actually live with their parents who are on income-related benefits, because they're classed as in employment. Because of that, the family can actually end up losing quite a lot of their income-related benefits. So what needs to happen is that the apprenticeship itself, it should be classed as training, and it should be recognised as training rather than an employment. So any young people that are on any income-related benefits, they can keep all of that, and that would significantly help an apprentice. And there's a massive discrepancy there.
Thank you. Any other insights? I will move on, because we've got some really interesting questions coming up, and I want to cover as many as possible. There is a question around internal engagement within your organizations. How have you achieved this? How have you got people interested in apprenticeships? In my experience, most people are willing. I was struck by what Grazyna said about, overworked, overstretched departments where they would say would love to, but we've got so much else on. Some of your engagement strategies with your internal colleagues. Pritti, let me come to you first.
Thank you, Vilma. So in terms of internal embedding it internally, we were faced with a lot of challenges, particularly around the response to COVID and restructures within teams and so on. So it has shifted since then, and in terms of sharing the value of apprenticeships, all the work that we've been doing around National Apprenticeship Week, sharing the success stories, embedding apprentices into information sessions. So we run information sessions which we advertise in our internal newsletter, where we give an overview of apprenticeships, success stories, also thinking about how are we making this possible in different departments. So for example, each apprentice is allocated with an apprentice mentor. What toolkits are we providing? What training and development opportunities are we providing, perhaps for those individuals in the department that want to upskill, reskill in attributes for within that role? Having apprenticeships as part of a journey that is available to internal staff as well. So we've got some internal staff that have engaged in level 4 and level 5 apprenticeship opportunities, but making sure that there are channels through training and development, but also learning and development, where apprenticeships is a massive part of that core curriculum or values-led core curriculum of what you see going forward as an organisation.
Thank you. Grazyna, what about you?
I have lots of cups of tea and biscuits with people and chat to them a lot. All of the work that I'm doing, so in my new role, is about making links between different departments and sort of making connections for people, because I think that's half the battle, is that some people just don't see it, or they can't see it, or they won't see it, whatever word to use there, but that sort of showing not just the value of it, but the way that they could I'm not explaining this very well, but the way that people can include apprenticeships in their team. So where we've got an apprentice in our team, that is, I made a choice to have an apprentice there rather than employing a facilitator or an officer in in that role. And I think that that is a way that a lot of other departments in the Abbey could do that as well. But where I've embedded it in strategy, that takes a lot of sort of groundwork and buy-in from people from the beginning, and just showing them that that is a possibility for their team, and showing them that it is really rewarding, and the work that goes into it is worth it, I think is the way to go.
Yeah.
Just to add in on the buy-in, often departments say, well, we don't have time, we haven't got the resource and so on, but we've used a model where we've got the line manager, the apprentice mentor, and a buddy, where some of that responsibility is shared across one department or through departments, and that's received really, really positively.
That's a good support structure there. So we're hearing strategically how you embed them, we hear how you operationalize them, and of course the value of tea and biscuits. Buzz, any insights from you on how you get engaged?
From my side is, I think when you talk about apprentices, some of your work colleagues think it's something new, and it isn't actually. Don't reinvent the wheel. I mean, essential apprentice, it's just that mindset. They are an employee of your organization. It is as simple as that, but they're just classed as an apprentice. So when we did get that buy-in, we just said they are just another employee. Treat them as an employee, but with regards to their pastoral support or their qualification, that's something that the training provider will take care of. Yeah, and that's actually worked really, really well. So that me as an overall apprentice manager, I've kept an eye on our apprentice. They've just simply fitted into a team as an employee and as part of this team. And then the training providers come along and provided that pastoral support. Yeah.
Thank you. That's really a pragmatic way of looking at internal engagement. Kath, even at the National Theatre, with all of this sort of fabulous history of apprentices, you must have had some internal sort of engagement work to do.
Absolutely, and that was the whole thing was predicated on that at the beginning, and I think it really did go all that way back. Our intention at the beginning was to create a foundation that we could build on, but that foundation was incredibly important, and it was back in the day, and it feels like a lifetime ago, and the attitudes feel so different now, which is wonderful. But it really was a bunch of grumpy people who couldn't see why they should be made to do this, and we worked really, really hard to turn that around. And the way we did it and continue to do it is involve the departments at every step. So we talked to them about the planning, we talked to them about what the apprentice will do, we involved them in recruitment. So we always have 3 or 4 members of the team involved in the recruitment day, largely so that when we appoint someone, they can't turn around to us and say, oh, we told you we didn't want that person. So we're making them participate in it, so that we don't not just thrusting an apprentice on them, but and once people start participating, then they start to be engaged, and then they start to have a connection, and that connection builds and builds and builds. And actually, because we are a more mature programme, it's interesting, we did it slightly differently because we had the capacity to do it. We did it slightly differently from Baz, in that we did provide a lot of pastoral care, which came from me. And then as we took on more apprentices, that became more difficult. So what I started to do was actually get the departments that had now had multiple apprentices and knew what they were doing. I give them much less support, and I focus on the new departments. And so I have teams at the National now who could run the apprenticeship programme quite easily without me, and it would be massively successful. And that's kind of my aim, is that they're so embedded in the organisation that different teams are just running their apprenticeships. But that's taken time and an awful lot of work. And I can completely hear what Baz is saying about if you can get your learning provider to take responsibility for things, because a lot of them don't. You shouldn't be alone as the employer. It should be that partnership, and the learning provider should be there to support you and have they know things that you and your staff can't possibly know. So it's a really important partnership.
Thank you, Kath. We're coming towards the end of this session, and I wanted to hear from each one of you very briefly for our last few moments. With all your experience, with the journeys, long or shorter as they are, on the issue of apprenticeships. What's the one thing that you think we should do as a sector to ensure that more employers take on apprenticeships and they're embedded within our sector? So one thing, I'll come back to you, Baz.
I would say value apprentices as an employee of your organisation. They're not something that are added on. Yeah.
Very good, and very precise. Grazyna.
I think accept apprenticeship as a valid sort of non-traditional route into work. So it's not all about degrees and postgraduate qualifications and things like that, that an apprenticeship is as valid as those things.
Yeah, acceptance of something that's so obvious, but you both said the same thing. Pritti, over to you.
So mine is the same as Baz, valuing apprenticeships as an organisation, but also having standards, particularly around the creative and cultural sectors being fit for purpose.
Fit for purpose standards, really important, and something that was discussed and was asked at the beginning. Thank you for that. Kath.
Mine is collaboration. I think we can only really deliver really effective apprenticeships if we're working together, so that apprentices get a better experience and employers can support each other to run these apprenticeships. So for me, it's collaboration.
I'll finish us on this because I did promise conviviality, and I hope that we had this. This is a sector that is always full of ideas and stretched for resources, and I think Kath's message and Grazyna's, Pritti's and Baz's is exactly the same. But we are in great institutions, some bigger, some smaller. We won't be able to achieve this without collaboration and learning from each other. There's a lot of generosity. There's been offers during this this call of kind of get in touch with me. I can share this. If you've got something that you can share with me, please come forward. So I think that makes my heart very warm. And on this note, I'd like to thank our panel for giving up their time, their expertise, and their generosity. A recording of this session, as I said, will be available and will be sent around to those attending the event, as well as those who registered but couldn't make it today. This isn't a one-off. This is part of an ongoing conversation, and the consensus is that there's a need to continue to work proactively and collectively to meet some of the challenges that we've discussed today. I'd like to thank Creative and Cultural Skills for hosting the event, and all of you who attended and you were with us today. Have a great rest of the day. Goodbye.